you want me to be producing tonight, or are you taking it?
Are we? We're live. I'm hearing voices come across, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm the one supposed to be talking. Who's talking here? Good evening, and welcome to Transistance. My name is Genevieve Bergman, and this is your weekly news and commentary show dealing with the subject issues around the transgender community as well as transgender adjacent community. We are going to be talking about a lot of things, so please ask questions in the chat here in Twitch. I also have TikTok Live going, but we do have some very serious topics to discuss tonight, so we probably won't get into as much detail as normal, but we are going to cover a lot of stories. So, Emily? We've been watching Alabama as the mic muted. They can't hear Emily. We've been watching Alabama as the mic muted. Okay, so we've been watching Alabama as the next big problem state when it comes to gender affirming care for transgender youth. And Alabama recently passed a law that will make it a criminal act for a medical care professional to provide any type of medical gender affirming care to transgender youth 19 or under. And this is one of those things that we've been following, cropping up in different states, but Alabama's is one of the most it seems to be going through, and the penalty on this is that any doctors, parents, or anyone else providing gender affirming care, including puberty blockers, hormones, or surgery, can face a felony criminal prosecution, up to 10 years in prison, and $15,000 in fines. Now, the Department of Justice says that because this is targeting the sex and gender identity of individuals, that the 14th Amendment has been violated. And under the 14th Amendment, all citizens should have equal protection under the law. The Department of Justice has asked a U.S. District Court in Alabama to block the law, and they released in a press release this statement: SB 184 thus discriminates against transgender youth by denying them access to certain forms of medically necessary care. It further discriminates against transgender youth by barring them from accessing particular procedures while allowing non-transgender minors to access the same or similar procedures. So we have the Department of Justice coming out and basically saying what we have been hearing in many other places. A cisgender youth can have certain procedures that a transgender youth is now barred from. So this is definitely the Department of Justice saying, no, if you're offering one group of people this procedure, then you have to allow access to that procedure across all type of individuals and not discriminate on any grounds. The thing is that when the governor, Kay Ivey, signed the law, this is how she justified the law. If the good Lord made you a boy, you're a boy. If he made you a girl, you are a girl. We should especially protect our children from these radical, life-altering drugs and surgeries when they are at such a vulnerable stage in life. And so we have, again, the intrusion of a religious ideology into the governing of, at this time, a state level decision, a state level law. So we're looking at some really big issues of constitutionality of these things. So the Department of Justice definitely had to step in and begin to discuss this.
It's just again, so interesting that they can come in and limit the rights of. They feel that they can come in and limit the rights of a certain subsegment of the population. It's really cool to hear that there are cases where cis kids get some of these treatments, and that's really going to help us a lot in that fight.
Yeah. Well, and there are cases where a cisgender child will have a breast reconstruction for for different reasons. So there is this question of how do you justify that across, from one youth to another. And when you start taking that up into 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, then you're dealing with some development things that people are saying, well, these are practically adult bodies that are being operated on. So, you can't really take those rights away from those individuals.
Well, the thing that is just weird to keep seeing pop up in these, I don't, there's no logic in a lot of the thought that they put out, a lot of the claims that they make when they're talking about stopping people from administering hormone blockers to anyone
Right.
under 18 or 19. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
do you not understand when puberty happens? Puberty blockers, I mean, you cannot give out puberty blockers to anyone under 19 or 18, depending on the law. And it's like, so you just don't understand what puberty is or when that happens?
Right. Well, but and here's the thing, Emily. When they are saying these things, what they're doing is that they are creating they're creating a category of saying, all right, this is what gender affirming care looks like. It is puberty blockers, hormone treatments, surgeries. And that's the natural progression of it. But what they are painting the picture as, by not going into detail on what WPATH protocols are for young transgender people, they are saying that all of this is being crammed into one time frame. If a child comes out at 8 years old, boom, they're on puberty blockers. 2 years later, they're on hormones, and then 2 years later, they're on surgery, and they're having surgery so that by the time they're 14 or 15, they've already had a full-blown gender affirming surgery procedure. And that's what they're creating, is they're creating this false narrative of how this is how things work. And without taking the time to say, there is a worldwide organization of endocrinologists and physicians and psychiatrists and psychologists who work together to create a set of protocols to offer structured, healthy, fact-based, evidence-based, gender-affirming care.
Fact and evidence based. Fact and evidence based. Wow, how far are we from that?
Right? Yeah, I know.
All right, moving to the next one. Maine Republicans can't stop obsessing about same-sex marriage, even in their platform again. What's going on here?
Okay, so on the heels of the Alito opinion being leaked, the Maine Republican convention, Republican Party convention, gathered and, they began to adopt their platform for the coming midterm elections so that they can begin to, push for delegates and keep their delegates informed, and they can inform their candidates on what their platforms are, and making sure that certain things are consistently spoken across the Republican Party in Maine. One of the things that has been sort of pushed into the forefront is the union of a man and a woman. One man and one woman is the only definition of marriage. When an amendment was proposed to remove that platform plank. It was overturned. So the party said, we're going to continue to push for the dissolution of same sex marriage rights, which, given the language of the Alito opinion, we do know that there is a push right now to remove or roll back Lawrence and Obergefell, and basically take back the rights that were given to same-sex marriage, and creating, the opening for more, or reinstating of sodomy laws across the country. So Maine is just making its party platform very clear. Now, here's the funny part. This is the Republican Party convention. One delegate said during the debate for the amendment that would remove marriage equality statement, the delegate said, "We receive our rights in the Constitution from God. We are conservative because we believe in our Christian values. If we take the definition out, then I believe we are dishonoring God." Another delegate said, "This is a progressive mindset trying to infiltrate our party." So essentially, you have members of the Maine Republican Party who are delegates saying that equal rights for homosexuals is essentially a godless and progressive ideology that is trying to undermine the purity of the Republican Party.
It just, one of the things that I grew up believing was that built into our government was the separation of church and state, because the whole point was religious freedom, freedom from a particular religion being foisted upon the people. That was the whole cornerstone of everything. And now they're trying to say that their belief in God is where we get our rights from God, but what they believe those rights to be, not what a giving God would do.
Exactly. And that's the issue at hand here, is the definition of what is a God-given right.
All right. 19 states plan to offer refuge to trans youth and families. This sounds like some really good positive news. What's going on here?
Well, right before we jump into that, let's take a moment to acknowledge Gender Meowster, who has just come in with 15 people on a raid. Gender Meowster, thank you so much. We do appreciate you and everyone you brought with you. Thank you so much for the love. We are doing Transistance. We are talking about some news. And right now, you came in at the perfect time. So many times you all come in when we are dealing with bad news or hard news. And now we have some sort of good news. Yay.
What makes this one sort of good news?
We've been following the news from places like California, where representatives have been talking about creating refuge status. And the very first, hints of that were from Senator Scott Wiener in California, where he was petitioning, he brought a bill forward in March that would allow for any family who was possibly under potential criminal threat by any anti-transgender legislation, they would be allowed to move to California and they would be protected. They would have refuge in that state, or basically, creating a sanctuary policy that would cover transgender families. That has also now spread or is spreading to include abortion. And states are beginning to look at both the anti-transgender and anti-abortion laws that are currently being worked through or on the docket to be activated according to the Supreme Court's decisions release. But what we have right now is we have 19 or 20 states currently working to provide a refuge for transgender youth and their parents, so that any penalties that they may have been levied against them in a state of origin where there was an anti-transgender law, the states of California, Minnesota, New York, they are all saying we're going to protect those families. We will protect them from as much legal fallout as they can. This is really challenging. I'll get to it in just a second, but other states that are looking at this are, and these are just bills being introduced. It doesn't mean that they're going to get anywhere, but Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Michigan, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia. Now, if you paid attention in that list, you heard a couple that you were probably scratching your head and saying, Florida just just declared open season on trans kids. And yeah, exactly. But at the same time, you do have Democratic representatives who are trying to bring legislation to counteract some of that anti-trans legislation by providing some form of refuge in those states. Now, I wouldn't put a lot of hope in a few of those states. Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, New Mexico, West Virginia, I would not put a lot of weight in those advancing to a protected status. But California, Michigan, New York, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Kansas, maybe, Maine, although Maine's dicey, New Hampshire, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington are all pretty good bets. So I hope that we see this happen. Here, go ahead. Do you have any comments, Em, you want to put in on that? Because I do have a couple of comments I want to make.
Yeah, the part that I saw in the article talks about that, not the states, it's LGBT friendly or LGBT themselves, lawmakers within those states that are pushing for those same types of things. So we'll have to see, just to what level it is. And like Jeannie pointed out, it depends entirely on the rest of the state and what support they're able to get for that. The thing that I saw early on in the first article about this that was really disturbing, I hadn't heard this about Texas, and let me know if you had, Jeannie, that Greg Abbott has directed state agencies to consider placing trans kids in foster care, taking the children away from their parents.
Yeah, when they began to talk about investigating parents of transgender children for accessing gender affirming care for them, that was a foregone conclusion. Because you see, when a family is investigated for child abuse, the children will be taken from their primary family of attachment, and they will be put into the foster care system unless an alternate family can be found who is willing to take them in. But the thing is that the Texas system is wanting to get those kids shuffled into the foster care system as quickly as possible. Hang on just a second. I do need to address something right here because somebody made a comment and I know they're wanting attention. So, uh, Kingdom 77778, where I'm getting the information is from Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, who directed his Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate families who have transgender children. And if they are found to be providing transgender affirming care, then the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has said that that is a criminal charge, that is child abuse. So that's where I'm getting my information. Please don't try to undermine me. Now, let
More
me talk
lies.
about the other problems with there's two things that are really going to come into play with these refuge states. The first is the constitutionality of states providing sanctuary against other states. Um, we definitely have a problem when we begin to look at extradition, because generally there has been a shared extradition agreement between the states of the of this country. When we begin to talk about creating a refuge state, um, and providing sanctuary status to people who are fleeing from another state's prosecution, we are looking at a constitutionary battle.
Mhm.
And this takes us right back to Dred Scott. And this takes us right back to the Restoration of Slaves Act, that if a slave ran away from their master, the northern states passed that a slave had to be returned to the master. We are looking at another constitutionary battle like that building when we have states passing a law that makes it a felony for a family to seek gender affirming care for children, then leaving that state and going to another state to find safety. And now we're creating another Dred Scott level decision.
Well, and I don't know why we don't hear more from the federal government at this point. Like there should be a massive, major set of statements coming from the Biden administration on this, because this is this country tearing itself apart over this issue. Like if they're making existence illegal in some states of a portion of the population, and other states are offering, that this refuge status, it's going to cause a massive rift in the country. Like this is very, very bad news for the country, not just the transgender community. This is vastly surpassed the need to care about this from the transgender side of things, and
Right.
what this means for the country. And it's just very sad to think about where we already are with the Trump Supreme Court, with what happened with the Texas law, the bounty hunter law against abortion. It's essentially law doesn't matter. The states can do whatever they want. So they're essentially trying to make it that there is no country.
Well, and again, when we look at the ideological differences between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, what we have is one party is emphasizing states' rights, the other one emphasizes federal rights. And so there's more centralization of power on one side or the other. For the Republicans, they want those rights back in the states. They want the states to be able to decide from state to state to state. They do not want New York. They do not want California. They do not want Chicago determining what this Alabama or Texas or Arkansas can do. They want that sovereignty of the state to be able to say that what we do in Mississippi is totally different from what folks do up in Vermont. And therefore, since their ideologies are different and their culture is different, so they're wanting to say that it's not the same country anyway in terms of those type of things.
Yeah, and it's just,
and so yeah, they are trying to push that back.
I didn't foresee when this started coming up, years, decades ago, when they were really pushing for this state sovereignty stuff from the government, that this was a question of morality. They want to determine their own morality in the states and dictate that to their citizens.
Right. Now, let me talk to this other issue real quick before we need to move on to another subject.
Okay.
These refuge moves, these sanctuary moves, are only addressing transgender youth. They are not addressing transgender adults. And I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to say this again. If we do not start changing the narrative right now, we are going to get caught just like those who are against the Roe v. Wade overturning got caught. They were more interested in saying, no, we cannot support transgender women in sports. No, we do not want transgender affirming healthcare for youth. And they were so concentrated on that they did not see the Roe decision coming up. And they became blinded by that push to get trans issues resolved, that Alito comes out and drops a bomb on the entire feminist movement. And Roe v. Wade is now threatened. If we continue to see the narrative of we need to bring trans kids and their parents into a place of sanctuary, we need to make sure that trans kids are protected. If we keep saying this, Danny is right. They are coming for the adults.
Oh yeah,
next.
Absolutely. They've already.
We see it in Missouri. Missouri is already pushing to make the number 25. You have to be 25 years old before you can have gender affirming care. We are looking at the Roe decision, the Alito opinion, potentially removing informed consent, which would make informed consent impossible, which is what we use as the means to access transgender affirming care as adults. Mm-hmm. And we are looking at the ideas of bodily autonomy being removed. We are looking at the ideas of rights of privacy being removed. All of these are coming together. So we have to stop saying we've got to protect trans kids. What we need to be saying is, period, we need to protect trans people. Mm-hmm. Adults, kids, doesn't matter. If somebody is a transgender individual, they need to be addressed. They need to be offered this sanctuary. They need to know that we, as adults, when we cannot safely live in these states because they are removing rights for us to access things that we are guaranteed under the Constitution, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go if they are only saying, well, we are offering this for trans kids. Sorry, you're a grown-up. You're going to have to deal with the accountability of the law yourself. And it's like, no, fuck that shit. Mm-hmm. You do not protect the children without protecting all people who are under the same category of marginalization. Sorry, soapbox is now pushed to the side.
No, yeah, it's just so obvious their end game, and they're pushing hard on it. They want to limit the rights of people to make their own decisions. They want to control what the citizens of the country do. They want a dictatorship where they have all the power and they control it. And anytime there's a movement, feminist movement, things like this, they say, oh, we're being attacked, and they have to double down on protecting against it. And they do that by limiting the rights of others. And the sovereignty of a legal medical procedure, legal medical decision, where you have to consult with professionals that have to follow a certain code of ethics and certain procedures and all of that, and they're highly, highly regulated. And now that doesn't matter anymore. and there is no limit to what this will go to. Yes, abortion was one that was a sticky wicket where people have strong beliefs about this on both sides. Transgender is the next frontier of that because we're not as strong of a voice as because we're just purely a smaller portion of the population. And then after that, then they've proven it out, and they can stop anybody from doing anything. You'll watch as contraceptives disappear from the country as a legal thing you can do. There's no end to the amount of control that the Republican Party will exert over the citizens of this country.
Yeah. And we're just going to continue to see the eroding of rights to the point where adults do not have the freedom to, we transgender adults will not have the freedom to be able to pursue the kind of life that we want to live.
Yep, they will have achieved abolishing basically LGBT from the United States.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. We are still having. Shoot, we're getting way off here. I didn't want to do this, but oh well, this is what I do. Thank you. I'm off for making wholesome pfeffer tonight. But we are still having to fight to get lesbians and gays on board with understanding that this is our fight. This is our lives. This is not just trans lives. This is gay. This is lesbian. This is bisexual. This is pansexual. This is all of us. Alito explicitly says in his opinion, this involves gay rights. This involves same-sex marriage. This involves the privacy around same-sex sexual activity. This is now moving from just individual groups into a full-blown attack on LGBTQIA+ rights.
Well, and the sad thing, and you're sort of alluding to it there in your commentary and the little soapbox that you've pulled out for this. But the truth is, when a subgroup gets attacked, so often the larger group tries to distance themselves so that they don't face the brunt of that attack.
Absolutely.
And the problem with that is then they're not present at the beginning of the fight to stop it dead in its tracks at the beginning. They're like, this isn't about us, it's them, and they're making us look bad. So it turns the larger group against the smaller group.
Yeah.
And we've totally seen that. We with that's where the LGB alliance comes from. It's just like these trans people are dragging us down. They're getting all this negative attention, and it's going to be bad publicity for us. So we've got to distance ourselves. Whereas, like you're saying, if they had just fought with us from the beginning, and we fight hard on a united front, we can stop this stuff earlier. And then as opposed to the domino effect where, okay, they attack and they disable the one group, and then the next group, and then pretty soon all of it. It just falls really easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And, divide and conquer is an old tactic. It is something that goes back to our very early days as hunter-gatherers. It was the idea, if you can take the weakest of the herd, separate it out, they do not have the protection of the herd, and therefore they are easy to take down and eliminate. When we start looking at the political sphere that we're in right now, transgender people are the easiest ones to target. Two reasons for that: size and pop culture. Because of the minuscule portion of the population that we represent, it is believed that we are a small and insignificant voice within the country. Secondly, because pop culture has already done such an effective job of propagandizing that transgender people are monsters, they are predators, they are psychopaths, they are sociopaths, they are violent, they are sadistic, they are all of these other things. It is so much easier to take that popular mentality and give it a politicized bend. And so, what we're looking at is thanks to popular culture and the relative smallness of our population, we happen to be the best target for them to go after.
All right, let's move on. This is going to be a kind of an interesting and a silly, silly turn from where we were a minute ago. Reporter nails GOP candidate on claim he didn't make homophobic slur in his campaign. What's going on here?
Right. So in Colorado, there's an individual running for governor, Greg Lopez, and when he was being interviewed by 9 News, Kyle Clark, he was confronted about a comment that he had made during a campaign speech to supporters. What he had said was, don't drink the Kool-Aid and believe he's not beatable, referring to Governor Paulus. Don't drink the Kool-Aid and believe he's not beatable, because he is. I think it's time we had a real first lady, don't you? Governor Paulus is married to his husband, Marlon Reese. So in making that comment, Lopez, was sideswiping at a gay couple occupying the governor's mansion. So when Clark interviewed Lopez, he asked him very simply, why choose to introduce homophobia into the race for governor? Lopez responds, it's interesting you would even mention that word because I didn't use it.
If you didn't say the word, it's not actually homophobia. That is interestingly twisted logic. Wow.
Yeah. I guess if you don't say gay, if you don't say same sex, if you don't say 2 men married, if you don't say homophobia, if you don't announce yourself and say, I am about to make a homophobic comment, it's not homophobia. But anyway,
that's some logic there. Whew.
Yeah.
Convenient.
So because I didn't, because I never even mentioned the word, I didn't use it. It wasn't homophobic. Then goes on to say that what he meant was that his wife, Lisa, will work very hard on issues that pertain to women and children. And I just can't believe that people would twist my words. So Clark goes on with the interview and says, I think that there's a chance, and God bless this reporter, y'all. This reporter deserves a Pulitzer just for this. To the gubernatorial candidate says, I think that there's a chance that you think that I and the folks watching are dumber than we are. Because I think everybody knew what you were saying, and the crowd that clapped for you knew what you were saying. And I am asking you, why introduce that into the race? You've got plenty of critiques on the governor, other than the fact that he's a gay man. So as Lopez continues to deny the comment, Clark claps back again and says, I don't think you could keep a straight face as you say that. Would you have an issue with candidate Heidi Ganahl's husband being the first gentleman? Lopez responds, No. Clark says, so it's just the gay guy. Lopez responds, you're not understanding the system. Kyle, please do not light a match because that's called gaslighting. We don't want things to explode. But you don't understand the system. I'm talking about having a female that's going to focus on women's issues and children's issues. This man, Lopez, did everything he could to avoid responsibility for making a comment.
I need to watch this interview. I need to pin Kyle Clark for a minute and see some of the other pieces that he's putting out, because that was quick and that was really good. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Should we move over to the Republican dumpster fire?
Yes, please. I want to.
Okay, so one of our top favorite people here, Lauren Boebert, celebrates leaked abortion ruling by making fun of trans people. Jeannie, please.
Well, you know there's going to be opportunity for commentary. So, first of all, understand that the leaking of the Alito opinion for the Republican Party, the issue of this leak and who leaked this document is of fundamental more importance than the civil rights of women and trans people. So finding out who leaked this precious document from the hallowed halls of the Supreme Court, that is more important than, oh, we're going to see a sudden increase in mortality rates.
Mhm.
But I digress. Lauren Boebert says, it seems the left can define woman again. And then, where's the outrage from the pregnant men? And then, the left has gone beyond questioning man, and now they are questioning the will of God, dangerous and demonic territory. She said, the left doesn't care about the opinion of women. They don't care about the opinion of anyone, frankly. Death and destruction is their mission again. But wait, there's more.
Of course there is. Of course she's got more.
She goes on to say in a different set of tweets that the left thinks misgendering someone is a more heinous crime than dismembering and murdering a baby. And I mean, Lauren Boebert is probably so close to representing the entirety of a huge portion of the Republican Party at this time. Because I was talking with an individual today. He was asking my opinion on a piece that he wanted to do for a podcast. And this is exactly how he phrased this. And he claims to be at least sensitive to trans issues. I don't know that he used the word ally. But he asked me the question, why is it that a transgender person will go on a 20-minute rant just because they get misgendered? Saying that transgender people are more concerned with those pronoun things than having just a calm, simple conversation. They go into hysterics for 20 minutes ranting about getting their pronouns right. So
You did it, didn't you? Did you do it?
I asked him, I said, what's your background? And he said, Caucasian. I said, what's your religious background? He said, Christian. I said, what is your sexuality? He said, heterosexual. And finally, I asked, what is your gender? And he said, male. And I said, so basically, what you're telling me is that you represent the one group within this culture who gets a pass on everything. I said, what would happen if that were a black man asking a police officer why he was being detained for 20 minutes, asking why he was being detained and getting hysterical? I said, would you have the same energy that that black man needs to calm down and speak rationally? Well, he said, but that's not the same thing. And Jeannie got a little heated. And I said, here's the deal. And at this point, we were on a voice call. I clicked my camera on and I said, you look at me. We're out in public. And somebody walks up to me. I don't say anything. And they say, what can I do for you, sir? How can I help you, Mr. Berkman? Can we get him something that he needs? I'm like, how would you consider that? And he hem-hawed about for a minute. And I said, to the effect of, when we go out in public and we are afraid for our lives just because we want to live our lives, you think we're being hysterical? That's where dehumanization begins. When people stop listening to another human being to respect them in who they are. We do not owe anyone civility. We do not owe anyone calm down. We do not owe anyone a silencing of our voices to make others more comfortable. Because when this country is actively moving to take away our rights as citizens of this country, and when we see an entire religious movement trying to create a system of child baby making factories, and if they can't make them, they'll take them through illegal means. We do not owe anyone courtesy to make their lives more comfortable.
Well, and just basically, if you're not respected constantly, when somebody does it, you're gonna go off on it. If you're constantly dealing with it, like that's just a basic human thing here. Let's
Now, let's go back to Greg Lopez.
okay.
Who is very much against abortion, was being interviewed by Kyle Clark. And when asked about the state law in Colorado that protects the right to an abortion, Lopez says, I do believe we need to undo it, and here's why. But here's why. It says that there is no life in the womb of a female, and I think that's wrong. When I read that language, it gives me really pause for concern as to, did we lose our moral compass here in Colorado? Continuing on, he goes on to say that if an abortion ban comes up, he would sign it as governor. So Clark asks, you have said specifically on this issue that you are pro-life without exceptions for rape and incest and life and health of the mother. Additionally, in 1993, you were arrested for violently assaulting your then pregnant wife. Some people might see those two things at odds, but they both involve you exerting control over a woman's body. Is that what Coloradans want from their governor? I want to have Kyle Clark's babies. That's all there is to it. I mean, the man is brilliant. Lopez insisted it was not a violent situation and we were both arrested for assault. So Clark reiterates, do Coloradans want somebody who has a history of both in word and in action controlling the bodies of women? So Lopez responds to the only authority he can. There's only been one perfect man that's walked this earth, and we nailed him to a cross. I'm not a perfect man. I made my mistakes, but I learned from them.
That was Clark's point, is you're doing the same thing. You have not learned. You're still in this pattern, this misogynist pattern, that it is the man's right to exert dominance over a woman and over her body. You have not learned a damn thing. That's the whole point.
So here's what the police report said. Lopez was accused of pushing his wife to the floor and kicking her when she was 6 months pregnant. The police report said that she had hit him on top of the head first. So both were arrested and both pled guilty to a charge of harassment. Lopez says that he had been drinking, and that was the reason behind it. The alcohol made me do it.
Well, and if he was eating Twinkies at the same time, as we remember from last week.
I know. So in 2018, when he was running, he and his wife Lisa, whom he is still married to, by the way, he made a video with her for that campaign in 2018 where they discussed domestic violence, and he said it made us stronger in our marriage.
It was a good thing.
Ba-dum-bum.
And of course, in line with all the Republicans that want to go back to some better, more beautiful time, it's when their dominance was absolute and no one spoke up about anything. There quote unquote were no issues because nobody was talking about issues. Women just did what they were told. And now that they've reestablished that in their relationship, I will knock you down to the ground and kick you like, some
dog.
Yeah. If you don't behave in line. And so
yeah, absolutely.
Well, Okay, we're moving over to Tennessee now.
We're going to hit a couple of things real quick.
Schools.
Uh, Governor Bill Lee in Tennessee signed legislation that would prevent transgender women from competing in college athletics. So basically, what it's doing is it is telling transgender adult women that they cannot compete in college athletics, which the last time I checked, NCAA and NAIA had the right to determine who played in those programs, but that's just me thinking that, and so I don't think I'm an expert on it. So,
Because in a lot of parts,
oh,
in a great part in this, you're talking about private organizations, private institutions.
right. Well, not always.
No.
Some of the colleges are state institutions.
Yes, but there's a mix, and so you have to, the laws have to be handled a certain way, and there's just no respect for for authority of anybody other than themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
So hopping over to Georgia, the Georgia High School Sports Athletic Association voted to ban transgender youth from playing on sports teams that correspond with their gender. These will go into effect in the fall of 2022, and it will require students to play on teams matching the sex listed on their birth certificates. So we have two states that are still pushing to get trans people out of sports.
Well, good news. The next article, the Biden administration is finally stepping up and saying something. Let's see. Is this very positive? Joe Biden warns LGBTQ plus kids they're the next targets of extreme MAGA crowd after Roe v. Wade. Not exactly what I was hoping for, I have to say.
Look, I'm not a huge fan of Joe Biden. I had some hope that we would see some indication of movement forward for trans rights because he did mention that in his campaigning. The fact that Joe Biden comes out after the Alito opinion is leaked and says that LGBTQ plus children are the next targets of the Republican Party basically says to me, Joe, you missed it, buddy. They've been coming after transgender people for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been coming after LGBTQ plus children for 2 years. They were the distraction to get Roe overturned. Because everybody jumped on board to say that transgender rights need to be squashed. Transgender children should not be allowed to transition. Transgender adults should not be allowed to go into restrooms. So they pushed the trans rights so that at the same time they could get the anti-abortion power that they needed to push Roe. Now Joe's coming along and saying, oh, well, hell, since they got Roe done, let's go ahead and admit they're going to focus on the kids. No, they've been focused on the kids, Joe.
And the thing we need you to come out and say is this has to stop and this is going to stop and here's how we're going to stop it. This is the leadership we need from the administration, not like, oh, well, shit, abortion's gone, so they're probably going to come for LGBT kids next. You might as well, you should start hiding your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband.
Right. So, according to The Guardian, Biden told reporters, what happens if a state changes the law saying that children who are LGBT plus can't be in classrooms with other children? Is that legit under the way the decision is written? And basically talking about the Alito opinion. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, I did hear you. I did get the reference, Emily. But they are already doing that through Don't Say Gay bills. They are telling trans kids, they're telling gay kids, they're telling lesbian kids and bi kids and queer kids, don't speak. Midvani, I am going to give you a little bit of grace. If you don't like what I say, okay. But don't call me out in chat. You can do it over in the Transverse.
I'm just, yes, we have covered plenty of stuff that he has said. I just, I don't feel like it's like there's enough coming out of that administration. Am I not being fair enough to him? It's hard to when there's so much going on, and the attacks against us are constant, and the defense isn't, I guess. Let's go to something a little bit nicer here, as the Don't Say Gay copycat bill in Louisiana is decisively killed off. What's going on here?
So again, we have multiple states talking about the Don't Say Gay bill, or replicating that in some way or another. Basically what it comes down to is that, just like everywhere else, that teachers are essentially injecting their quote unquote propaganda into their classrooms on a mission to sway or change the gender or sexual identity of their students. Now we do know that that the research has come out that queer kids are considering suicide more and more. And we know that by taking that away from them, by taking away the ability that they have to reach people who are able to support them that they're not getting at home, by taking that away, we remove a chance for them to avoid that outcome. But the bill was defeated, and so they don't have to worry about this until the next round of legislation, where they may try to do something slightly different.
That's very optimistic of you, Jeannie, where they may try. May. The Republicans might continue their attack on LGBT folks. You never know.
Right.
Oh, should we get to something just absolutely insane?
Sure.
A GOP candidate joked that he would tell his daughters to lie back and enjoy rape. And surprisingly, he's not doing so. He didn't do so well in his election. What's going on here?
Right. So a few months back, Robert Reagan said during his campaign that this was on a live stream, and it was sponsored by the conservative Michigan Rescue Coalition. During the event, Reagan was asked whether he thought Republicans should continue to overturn the 2020 election. In response, he compared accepting the election's results to lying back and accepting rape. Having 3 daughters, I tell my daughters, he said, Well, if rape is inevitable, you should just lie back and enjoy it. That's not how we roll. That's not how I won this election. We go right at it.
I'm trying to read it over here. Sorry, I'm looking off camera, but I'm very confused. I tell my daughters. But then he says that's not how we roll. That's not how I won this election. We go right at it.
Yep. Basically saying, all right, accepting the results is lying back and accepting rape. So, this is the analogy that he uses. I have 3 daughters. I tell my daughters, if rape is inevitable, and I'm going to use the quotes, and then I'm going to come back and interpret this. If rape is inevitable, you should just lie back and enjoy it. That's not how we roll. That's not how I won this election. We go right at it. So, this is what he is saying. He tells his daughters, well, look, you're just going to get raped. So, if you're going to get raped, you may as well just lay there and try to make the best of it. But we, the Republican Party, are better than that.
I'm not sold.
But that's what he's saying.
Yeah. Because you as women don't have power in that situation, but we as white men in the government do have the power, and we're going to fight back against this stuff. That is an interesting set of comments. That is an intriguing thought process from someone who I hope their political career is over.
We would hope so. He did lose.
Mm-hmm.
He was expected to win, but yeah, he did not make it. And I'm kind of hoping that this will end his hopes of doing this. I hope it comes back to haunt him for every candidacy.
Mm-hmm.
Just also want to throw out there that he had this little wonderful piece. Feminism is only applied against white men because it has absolutely nothing to do with protecting women as a sex or defending the feelings of individual women. It is a Jewish program to degrade and subjugate white men.
And wow, how subjugated they are. Jeez, so sad. Much cheer.
Now here's the interesting side note. Reagan's own daughter told people, if you're in Michigan and 18 plus, for the love of God, do not vote for my dad for state representative.
Perfect. All right, you alluded to this in a previous story, but we were talking about how places are blocking access to help. Like suicide prevention websites, even, which is just talk about insanity, Shannon. The students are fighting back. How are they going about this?
Okay, so we have talked about how in Texas, there have been efforts to block access to the Trevor Project on state-run government pages listing suicide resources. The Katy Independent School District, which is in Southeast Texas, filtered out the Trevor Project from any school computers. So what they did is that they had tried to comply with something called the Children's Internet Protection Act, but the filter specifically blocks access to LGBTQ resources, including the Trevor Project. Now, the rationale that they gave was that the Trevor Project had chat capabilities, but the web filter allows students to access Twitter and Facebook. So there was a teacher, Cameron Samuels, a non-binary, student, not a teacher. Cameron Samuels is a non-binary student, and basically said that the assumption that people communicating on the Trevor Project are predatory is bigoted and homophobic. Yay, we do appreciate that. School officials told him that students can still access non-LGBTQ suicide prevention resources. But Samuel's question, why couldn't they, access this important one?
Yeah.
The web filter allows access to RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. It also allows access to Alex Jones's InfoWars website, which, if you remember from a few weeks ago, Alex Jones has a thing for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they have their own little thing where they go back and forth about trans people on that show that he runs. So you have these filters that are keeping out healthy resources for LGBTQ kids, but they can get access to Alex Jones, who is pretty much just as homophobic and transphobic as you can possibly be. So, Samuel has been getting the students together to continually push for the Katy Independent School District to unlock these sites, to basically say, we want access to these. We want LGBTQ sites included. We want to see, the resources available so that we have something that we can depend upon. Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio have all included the petition in their statements against this. So I love watching kids. I love watching kids rise up. I love watching kids go out and just fuck with people. That's, in my opinion, that's the greatest thing that kids can do, is go out and fuck with people, because they have the power to do that.
I love the comment that Samuels makes here, that school officials have said that sites with LGBTQ content are not part of the educational curriculum or common classroom activities. Trying to just kind of skirt the issue and say, oh, that's just not part of what we teach here. Yet, and then Samuels continues, yet they won't explain how People Magazine, ESPN, Gun Show Trader, or Breitbart meet this same standard.
Right, and they can't, and they won't, because any of those other pieces are considered to be legitimate journalism.
Talking about more people taking, things into their own hands. Trans people are being failed at every turn in Alabama, and this group is now taking matters into its own hands. Who is this that's starting to fight back in Alabama?
The Knights and Orchids Society, which, Emily, I'm going to start putting a burr under your saddle to get these people on Transgender show. I really want to hear the story of these folks. The Knights and Orchid Society is based in Selma, Alabama, but it covers pretty much all of the state of Alabama. And this is a Black, trans, and LGBT led grassroots group that is doing everything that it can to help communities. And we've referenced this organization in the past, but we haven't really talked a lot about them. But the TKO Society provides a spectrum of health and wellness services for LGBT plus community in the South, prioritizing Black trans folks. Society Communications Director Christina Nicholson says, "My motto for years has been nurturing through non-traditional care because the health and wellness services that we offer are unique to the community that we serve, which is mostly transgender residents of Alabama and surrounding states. So we provide access to housing, primary medical care, hormone replacement therapy, gender-affirming medical care, peer support, regular HIV and STI testing and treatment, and endocrinology services through our network of community partners." They have expanded beyond traditional medical care to include nutritional services, delivering food to local areas where people have limited access to healthy foods, places known as food deserts within Alabama. And this is one of those organizations that is going out there and they are making the effort. They have youth ambassadors programs where young trans and gender nonconforming people host events to learn about anti-LGBT plus bills. They're trying to cultivate those young people into leaders and lawmakers of the future. So, this is an amazing group. Like I said, I would love to see them on the Transgender show. I would love to hear what their story is and more about what they're doing.
Yeah, that'd be great. It sounds like they've got a lot of parallels between what they're doing and what we were intending to do with the Transverse. So I'm very excited to talk to them about that. That's awesome. All right, let's move on to a tragic piece about heroism here, as a Black trans teen is fatally shot while heroically protecting a friend at a party. What's going on here, Jeannie?
Yeah. So, Ariana Mitchell, 17, was at a party in Hampton, Virginia, and a fight broke out. She was trying to intervene in the situation. She was, let's see. So let's get these details because everything gets kind of confusing here. All right. The suspect, Jimmy LaShawn Williams, shot the teen during an argument between Ariana's friend and his girlfriend. Mitchell's friend, Ariana's friend, told news that she was the original target, as Williams' girlfriend was going to get her boyfriend to come shoot me and everybody at the house. That's a quote from her. So she was trying to break this up when somebody pulled a gun out. This gentleman, Williams, who was 19, and from what police have been able to sort out, Williams questioned Ariana's gender identity and then shot her multiple times. She was protecting a friend so that her friend could get away from this shooting. But in the process of intervening in that situation, she was very much a victim of gender-based hate crime. But here's the takeaway from this, y'all. She was one of ours, and she was willing to step up and defend and protect her friends, who, from everything that we can see, were cisgender. Absolutely. She is a hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she should be remembered as such. Ariana Mitchell, 17 years old, was and is a hero.
Died putting other people in above her. That's
Yep.
That's the definition. All right. Let's get back to some of the silliness here. Pansexual art teacher fired after allowing students to draw pride flags. After allowing them, not instructing them to, allowing them to. What?
Casey Scott is a first-year art teacher at Trafalgar Middle School in Cape Coral, Florida. And she was fired for discussing LGBTQ issues and her pansexual identity with her students. This happened before the Don't Say Gay law goes into effect. And there are observers who have said that her termination is a warning to others to not discuss LGBTQ issues in the classroom. So Scott had the students in her class draw flags the day after she came out to her own family. Some of her students who identify as non-binary, bisexual, and gay drew various queer pride flags representing their identities, and she hung these flags on her classroom door. She said, "I wanted to show these kids that it's better to be open about ourselves than hide it away." When students asked her about her own sexual identity, she told them that she identifies as pansexual. "I like anyone, despite male, female, non-binary, transgender." She is married to a man, though she told students that she has both a husband and a girlfriend. So, pansexual, polyamorous. She also told students that they could talk to her if they ever wanted to discuss their own identities. Soon after that, school administrators told her to remove the student's flag from the door, and to comply with their demands, she destroyed the flags in front of the students. This is her explaining. "I went over to the recycling bin, I grabbed all their flags, and all the kids were staring at me, and I crumbled their flags in front of them." Officials told her to go home for the day, and then officials later fired her for not following state-mandated curriculum.
Which is so sad, because what they were trying to do, what she was trying to do, was to comply with their, with their orders, and keep her job, and they fired her anyway. So she ended up doing that in front of the kids, and it didn't matter. Like, she still got fired anyways. If she'd known that, I'm sure her reaction there in the moment would have been very different.
Yeah,
It's just
very much so.
It's just sad to see them force her to do that to the kids.
Yeah.
Let's see. This one gets a little bit funny. I like this. A 16-year-old Tennessee trans girl denied an education, live streams the cops taking her in for truancy. This is another one that seems like it's sort of a couple piles of hypocrisy on top of each other. What is going on here?
So, in Tennessee, a 16-year-old transgender girl who wanted to go to school was denied the use of bathroom access. So she didn't go to school, even though she wanted to, because she was not allowed access to the restroom that she should have been allowed access to, because, interestingly enough, Supreme Court helped decide that. Eventually, it was decided that she was truant, and police were ordered to go and take her and put her into foster care. So while she is playing Minecraft, police officers bust into her room and take her into custody so that she could be taken to foster care. So thegamer.com reported on this. During the live broadcast of her playing Minecraft, she is streaming, playing Minecraft, when the police break into her room, and she's just trying to ignore them. But they have finally took her into custody and removed her from the house.
I love this, that one of the cops asked her as they're dragging her off, "Are you winning?"
Jeez.
She states here, "This will probably be my last broadcast because they're trying to get me to kill myself or go into foster care or something, instead of just giving me an education. Honestly, I just want to go to school, but they don't want me to go to school because I'm trans. I'm so stressed."
Right.
I hope those people enjoy trying to sleep tonight.
Oh, they'll sleep fine, because they saved her from the evil forces of. Okay, y'all. Jeannie's brain has been going to very, very naughty places. I'm thinking about starting a skit. Okay?
Okay.
And I'm thinking of getting a hooded cloak and doing a skit where basically I come on the screen and I talk about being Darth Transius, the evil dark lord of the trans movement, promoting the ideology of what it means to be a transgender person, and talking about the force powers that we have to convert children from their normal straight little worlds into little queer people who eventually grow up into completely brainwashed, mindless trans zombies. And I really, really, really think that there is a part of the population who will take me seriously.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. That would be.
Because that's the way they look at it. They think that we are evil, that we are evil incarnate, and that we want to basically snatch children out of their little straight cis world and introduce them to the debauchery that is being trans queer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the debauchery, of Emily trying to tile her bathroom for 4 years. The debauchery of me deciding on whether or not I'm going to put shrimp in my meal. That's how horrible we are, is we want to introduce straight cis kids into what it means to be trans so that they will become one of us and give up on the beauty that is, cis hetero living. Jeannie needs a drink.
Oh no. So someone was asking for follow up on this, and I think I might have. No. No, there's somebody else with a last name Win, a teenager charged after a missing man, something. It's not Vio. It's somebody else. There is scant little information about this. And I think,
Well,
part of the thing
tough
is
because she's a minor.
in anything where they talk about her, they're gonna dead name her probably. And she's a minor, so there's not gonna be a lot that mentions her by name.
Right.
And so yeah, there really isn't any follow-up information we have on this yet.
Yeah, with being a minor and in the system, there's not going to be anything openly. This is going to take personal, family level type stuff.
Let's move on to what's going on in the prison system. A trans woman has sued North Carolina for putting her in a male prison in inhumane conditions. What's going on here with this story?
We've already talked about in other places where, she's been back on Twitch as recently as 2 hours ago, Winter Nicole says.
Oh, let's go. That's awesome. Yay.
The North Carolina ACLU filed a complaint at the end of April on behalf of Kanatika Zaire Brown, a transgender woman who's being held at the Anson Correctional Institution. Kanatika has been denied gender-affirming care. Additionally, she was held in a male facility for 2 years before being transferred to the Anson Correctional Institute. So basically, she was denied her gender-affirming care, which is allowed under North Carolina law, and it is also covered by the American with Disabilities Act, as well as the Rehab Act of 1973. So this is all pretty much violating her constitutional rights to fair access to medical care, even though she is incarcerated. Because they refuse to allow her to receive gender affirming treatment, dysphoria put her at risk for self-harm, and basically in being in a place of surrounded by men as a transgender woman, she was at risk constantly for threats of sexual based assaults. So she is suing to have that. Well, ACLU is suing on her behalf.
Good. All right. Let's see. A teen is to skip graduation after the principal insists on dead naming him.
Again, I love stories where we see teenagers basically just busting the balls of anybody who's old and white. Bradley Curry is basically in his senior year. He is a transmasculine student, and he says that the principal, Mike Witten, indicated that he will call on the student's dead name and not the chosen name during graduation. Now, for the past few years, Bradley has been referred to as Bradley by school staff and classmates. Since 12 years old, he had been going by Bradley, and all of the teachers called him that. All of the classmates called him Bradley. Now, 2 weeks before graduation, the principal is saying, no, we will not acknowledge your name. And says that he will not be able to attend graduation because the principal's personal feelings against referring to trans people by their names is getting in the way.
Again, going back to just common courtesy and decency, it doesn't mean you endorse a behavior to show
Right.
respect to somebody. Like it doesn't reflect on you in any way to just simply be a decent human being. And yet these people are so entrenched and so dead set on this that again, they've lost all sense of morality and just human decency. It's very sad.
Right. And he goes on to say that, there is no policy prohibiting that.
Mhm.
There is no school board policy. There is nothing that prohibits using his chosen name.
Yep, it's a personal choice that the principal's making.
Yeah.
We talked about either another school doing something like this, or maybe we talked about this school before, but Diversity Day has postponed again at Turpin High School and banned from school hours.
Now, this may have been last week. I don't know, but Anderson Township, Ohio, the Turpin High School, the Diversity Day that they had planned was being postponed. And then after an emergency school board meeting, they, basically just decided, no, we're not going to do this again. And it was just bickering back and forth. The board voted 4-0 to ban Diversity Day from occurring during school hours or through school or taxpayer resources.
Okay. So we move on to another school then?
Yep.
This is even worse. This school district apologizes following an after-school drag show, outside of the school hours, and the teacher was placed on leave. What's going on here?
Right. So, the school district discovered this through social media as people were posting videos of it. Let's see. I'm trying to get to the facts before I do this. Very little detail. Okay, so one of the teachers organized a drag show after school, and when parents started seeing social media reflection of what this was, they began to react to that. Excuse me for one moment here. Cronisker, here's the thing. This is a child who wants to be recognized for his identity. Doesn't matter if it's one day. Doesn't matter if it's one time. When one person decides to disrespect him enough to say, I don't recognize you as who you are, that man is setting that child up for a process of being dehumanized throughout his entire adult life. You tell him to get over it, you're dehumanizing him. So here's what I want to tell you. This is not the place for you to come in here and say, he's just crying, he's just whining, he needs to get over it. No, he doesn't need to get over it. That principal needs to sit his ass down and shut his mouth because he's out of line. That young man should be allowed to be recognized for who he is. End him.
Well, and that comment also greatly diminishes the importance of that day for that child. Like graduation's a very important day. High school graduation's a very important day. Like it isn't something minuscule or or whatever. I don't know what to say about this this drag performance. You know, it's the same thing we keep saying, that just because you promote acceptance and allow people to be who they are doesn't mean you're somehow forcing it on other people. I just don't get that logic at all. Should we move on to Missouri?
Go ahead and cover this. I got to get my cool back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Missouri schools accused of violating federal law while gathering student information without parents' consent. So this is something that we had talked about before, about you know, the rights of privacy of students being violated by people gathering information about them, putting together databases and things like that. And it's awesome to see that the schools are being accused of violating federal law. I don't know who's accusing. Let's see here. A legal group is calling for an investigation into a school district, claiming that schools violated state and federal law in the process of collecting information from students without the parental consent. Again, contradicting the claims that they make, that they are for the rights of individuals, the rights of parents, particularly, and they're protecting anybody. We had parents in Webster Grove come to us with these surveys, and they said they did not get consent. So yeah, the Southeastern Legal Foundation says that students in the Webster Grove School District were asked about topics including their mental health, political beliefs, and sexual identity without their parents' permission. And I think that's a pretty big violation, yes. If the schools want to ask them, then they need to let parents know that these surveys are happening in advance. They need to give parents chances to opt in, or at least at a minimum opt out. And yeah, I mean, it's exactly the opposite of what a lot of these folks are saying, that you know, it's the parents' right to decide if the child should be exposed to sexuality and things like that. And yet the school district feels that it's their right to ask students about this kind of stuff. Ridiculous. I'm glad to see that they're getting called on the carpet on that.
Yeah.
Moving over, let's keep it going here. Just roll fast. Doctors could go to prison for providing health care to trans people in Alabama. Again,
yeah, and this is what we were talking
new
on at the top of the show, that this is going to make it a felony for any doctor to prescribe gender affirming care for anyone 19 years or under. Keep in mind that this is definitely pushing the age up by 1 year. Oklahoma is next. They are pushing for 21. Missouri is after that. They are pushing for 25. So we're seeing this increase bit by bit by bit by bit.
Let's go back to the from the sublime to the ridiculous, and talk about Senator Ron Johnson, who doesn't understand how science works, and is saying that it may be true that COVID vaccination can give people AIDS. What was prompting this complete lack of truth?
So first of all, he is, looking at the world through the anti-vax lens of, just rejecting science outright. But basically, the senator is open to a bizarre alternative fact that somehow the coronavirus is... Sorry, Dinah is taking off with my headphones. No, girl, you can't play. You can't play with my headphones. Okay, they won't fit your ears. Your ears are prettier than that. Okay, so basically believing that the corona vaccine is going to give people deliberately AIDS. He says, you've got more than 100 doctors here, all of whom will tell you these shots caused vaccine-induced AIDS. They purposefully gave people AIDS. They knew all of this, and yet they licensed these shots anyway. This is criminal intent. Now, that was Todd Callender. Johnson replies with, "You got to do one step at a time. Um, Everything you say may be true, but right now the public views the vaccines as largely safe and effective. That vaccine injuries are rare and mild. That is the narrative," said Johnson. This is the senator. The public believes that, it's relatively safe. That's the narrative. That's what the vast majority of the public accepts. So until we get a larger percentage of the population with their eyes open to, whoa, these vaccine injuries are real, why? You've got to do step by step. So he wasn't really coming out and saying that the vaccines were responsible, but he wasn't correcting that either. Because he definitely was not. Yeah, he was not smart enough to do that.
We've got two stories coming up, spread out a little bit here about Trump making a false claim that seems to tie into this one. Do we want to put those two together?
Oh, absolutely. Anything with Donald Trump would just tickle my gut.
Okay, so Donald Trump has made a false claim that 60% of transgender kids regret it later in life.
Yes. So we know that Donald Trump is extremely famous for deep investigative research, fact checking everything that comes out of his mouth, and ensuring that he is using the most objective language to be able to communicate his message. So when Donald Trump was being interviewed on the Christian Broadcasting Network, and I am not going to dare speak about the basically he said, "This transgender movement is out of control. Joe Biden thinks there are at least 3 genders, and I'm curious, do you see this transgender movement as evil, unbiblical?" This is the interviewer. Trump: "That's not the way it should be. That's for sure. It's a terrible thing. I mean, especially when you're taking children that don't even have this period to form." And in many cases, I hear 60% of cases later in life, they say, "Why did they do this to me?" 60%. No, I think it's a terrible thing.
And why did they do this to me? Like, who? Wow. So then we get to some actual facts here, and we see that the overwhelming majority of children who socially transition still identify as trans years later.
Right. So this was data from the Trans Youth Project. It was a large-scale national longitudinal study on the lives of trans kids. 317 youth between 3 and 12 who had already socially transitioned, living in 40 states and 2 Canadian provinces for 5 years. That's the scope of this study. That is the scope of this project. So, 317 kids. 94% still identified as either a trans girl or trans boy during the 5 years. The remaining young people had retransitioned, what the study referred to as when a young person changed their gender identity, and 3.5% identified as non-binary. The researchers found that 2.5% of the study's participants were using pronouns associated with their sex at birth and could be categorized as cisgender at the time when the final data for this study was collected. So what we're looking at is 317 students. Let me do this right here. Somebody who's a math genius probably should be doing this.
Mathing.
So 317 times 0.94 equals 298 kids out of 317 said, yep, I'm still trans.
Mm-hmm. And the majority of the people that are left, the 6% that are left, the majority of them only don't count in that number because they now identify as non-binary.
Right.
So what's 2.5% of 317 kids?
8 kids.
8 kids that have now gone back and identify as cisgender folks.
Right. 8 kids who, between the ages of 3 and 12, were observed for 5 years. So at the end of the study, they were 8 to 17. At the end of that time, 8 kids said, "Nah, I was good the other way."
Well, and the thing that I like about this, the thing that I think is most exciting about what's going on here is that this data comes from something called the Trans Youth Project. It's the first large-scale national longitudinal study on the lives of trans kids. And why this is very important is we don't have a ton of data to support ourselves.
Right.
Because there haven't been a lot of studies focused on trans people before. They just haven't.
Right.
They just haven't had the studies. They haven't collected the data, so we don't have the data behind us to prove any of our points. So this is really exciting to have this Trans Youth Project that is apparently 5 years into their study, and so we don't have a lot yet. This is pretty exciting to hear, but in the next 5 years, we'll have even more data in the next, in the 10 after that. So hopefully this will help a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And we are running out of time, so give me the Madison Cawthorn story because I got to do it. I've got to do something to put myself in the right frame of mind to end this show because you want to end it on a positive. So I've got to do this.
Okay. Where are we starting? Are we starting with what happened? What was leaked, or what Trump is now saying about him?
No. Let's start with the video. Let's put everything in context here.
Okay. So apparently there was a video leaked that shows Madison Cawthorn naked and humping towards a friend's face.
So, first of all, I just want to say, Emily, I am very proud that you were able to do that with a straight face. That is very commendable. All right, Madison Cawthorn has been the favorite whipping dog of the LGBTQ plus community lately because he was so much men need to be men need to be strong, men need to be manly. And over the last few weeks there have been a series of different revelations that maybe Maddie was not necessarily he wasn't using manly in the way that everybody else thinks of manly.
Is he a man's man? A man's man? Is that what this?
Yeah, he's definitely a man's man. So Madison Cawthorn is caught in a video butt-ass naked humping a friend's face while Hooked on a Feeling is playing in the background. The funny part of this is that the video was given over by a supporter and big donor. Cawthorn said, "Yep, that was me. He owned it. He said that was me, and he was being crass with a friend trying to be funny. That's it. He claimed that it was part of a blackmail campaign. And he was talking, I mean, he lumped it all together with the lingerie pictures of him on the cruise and, you know, all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
Now, once again, we have to keep in mind that Madison Cawthorn has been very hardcore, rah, Trump this, Trump that. Manly men need to stand up because this country is ruining men. You know, do you know how bad you have to be? And I mean this in the most sincere way. Do you know how bad you have to be for Donald Trump to think you're really weird? Madison Cawthorn is endorsed by Donald Trump, but a source close to the Trump organization said he's sitting back and wants to see what happens, but he's disappointed with Madison and thinks that he has problems handling his public relations. Another source said that Trump was shocked and disgusted by the footage, going so far as to ask, was Cawthorn effing his cousin? President Trump is completely weirded out by the allegations.
I like Shannon's comment. Silly boys always naked, humping each other's faces as a lark.
Look, let's just, come on. Let's give Madison Cawthorn just a little bit of credit, you know, and give him some leeway. This is just locker room humor. Somebody will get that eventually. That's okay.
I love the Autumn brought up the Tucker Testy Toaster.
The Tucker Testy Toaster.
I had forgotten all about that. Oh my god. Yes.
But for the most part, I mean, the point of the story is if Madison Cawthorn weirds Donald Trump out, somebody should be scratching their head and saying, what's next? Because this guy is, I mean, we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, we've got Lauren Boebert, we've got, what's his name that's accused of sex trafficking, and we've got
Gates.
Madison Cawthorn. And yet, the Republican Party is still projected to win the midterms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their insanity knows
nothing. Wait. I forgot. We also have the candidate who is in jail for killing his cancer-stricken wife who had just finished her last chemotherapy treatment for breast cancer. He was elected while he was in jail for killing his wife.
Yeah, the party of morality. There you go. That's it. All right.
And I'm glad to know that we're the mentally ill.
Yeah, clearly, right? Clearly we're the ones that are disturbed and grooming people. Oh my god. Anyways, I think that's a fairly light and silly enough note to leave the show on. Thank you all so much for coming, Jeannie. Thank you so much for all your work on this show. I'm sorry I wasn't able to do much more of the heavy lifting, but hopefully next week that will change. For tonight, for Genevieve Bergman, I'm Emily Kleckner, wishing you good night and good news.